Hello, everyone. Welcome to our April Training Tuesday for OU Campus. Today's topic is common XSL elements in OU Campus. During this presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode as this session is being recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. I'll attempt to address your questions throughout the presentation, but if there are any questions that I can't get to, I will provide you an answer via email after this presentation. I will be your presenter today. My name is Barbara McQuillan. I am the training supervisor here at On the Update. So let's go ahead and jump in. So our plan for today, we're going to talk a little bit just about XSL in general. So you have a little bit of a background on what we're going to be diving into today. We're going to talk about the subcomponents of XSL. And then we're going to go into all of our different examples that we commonly use inside OU Campus. So you'll be able to see things that you'll often find sprinkled throughout your own XSL. So talking about what is XSL, it's essentially a templating language. It's used to transform, translate, render XML files or documents. So inside OU Campus, your .pcf files contain a combination of XML information and then HTML nodes in there. The XSL then looks at the content inside that PCF file, makes adjustments and changes as dictated by the XSL. XSL and XML, that relationship is very analogous to what you would see for CSS or HTML. So your CSS is your style sheet acting on the HTML. XSL is your style sheet acting on the XML. An interesting note here, XSL itself is not a language. It's actually written in XML. It is just a set of instructions, elements, and functions that all define together to allow transformations to happen. But the document itself is still XML, so you still do have to follow all of your XML syntax requirements. Your subcomponents of XSL. So XSL is kind of an umbrella term. Inside of that, you're going to have your XSLT. So those are essentially the element instructions. So throughout you'll see XSL colon and then something. That's your element instruction. I do have a link here. I'll provide you guys with the PowerPoint presentation here on our support site after we're done with our presentation. So you have the link to documentation that goes through all of these element instructions for XSLT 3.0. The second subcomponent is going to be Xpath. So Xpath is really two different things. It's a function library and it's data navigation. So the XML document that you're going to be translating is going to be treated very similarly to the way you would write a root relative path. So it looks at that node tree structure and then looks at the child nodes inside of it, and you basically build out the target using what appears to be a root relative path starting from the root node. There are additional expressions that you can use to help target specific things, go along specific axes. We'll talk about some of those today, but it's all gathered up in there. Again, just like with the XSLT, I've included two different links here that'll get you to some additional documentation that goes over the functions and expressions that are available. But essentially in this example on the right-hand side, the function is going to be called here in the front, and then it's going to be enacting on that path expression that you have right there. The last subcomponent is going to be your FO. So this is formatting objects. They're used primarily in order to create PDF outputs. So very similar to CSS, is going to be defining the different way things flow or be displayed. You're going to have some things that look very similar to CSS rules written into them. This is primarily used in our OU Campus implementations for course catalog. So for our purposes today, we're not really going to be focusing on FO. We're going to look primarily at the other two. We'll have to save FO for an additional Training Tuesday at another time. So the rest of this PowerPoint is essentially going to go through every element, every expression, every function that I'm going to be talking about today, and gives kind of a layman's terms example or definition of what each of these things are. So rather than run through just things on PowerPoint, I actually want to jump inside of OU Campus and show these to you so you can see how they work. But again, I'm going to provide you with this PowerPoint so you'll have all of these quick definitions so you can always go back to them. So let's go ahead and shrinky dink that down. So to give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at today, so I have essentially created a section that I'm calling TT, Training Tuesday, Common Xsl Elements. I'm going to zip up this entire section here, and again, I'll provide it as a resource. So everything that we're looking at today, you will have access to. Let's go ahead and make that. Let's make it even bigger. There we go, so you can see everything. Lost my Q&A though. All right, we're going to have to do it this way. All right, so as we're going through it, I do have an index page. That's where I built all of my pieces here. I do have an underscore resources folder. My common Xsl elements.xsl, that's the primary Xsl that I've built all of these examples into. But I also have this underscore shared section in here that's going to have all of these little pieces that are going to be necessary. So again, all of it will be provided to you. So over to this first tab that I have here, this is my index page that I've created. I've essentially taken each one of the different elements that I'm going to be showing you. I've split them up into particular H1 sections here, and then I have H2s on this page that are defining what it is that we're looking at, and then you'll have an example here. You're going to notice most of these have an editable region button, and then some don't. We'll talk a little bit as I scroll, yeah, and some don't. I'll talk a little bit more about why some of these appear as editable regions and some do not in just a moment. On my second tab here, I have the source code of that index page, so you can actually see what I've included inside the editable regions. And on my third tab here, this is that common Xsl elements.xsl file. So it's all contained in here. All right. So coming back to this first tab, in order to get all of these things to work the way that we want to, the first thing I need to do is have Xsl templates. They essentially define a set of actions or rules to be taken. Switching over to my third tab here, I have all of my kind of introductory pieces at the top. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You're going to notice starting on my line 14, I have Xsl templates. Each of these templates is, again, that set of rules. Now, a template can be called in two different ways. I can call it specifically by name. So right here, I have this named template. So inside the Xsl, I would just say, put the one named head right here. And I have an alternative attribute here of match. Match is going to look through the XML document that I am reviewing. In this case, it's my PCF file. And anytime the qualifier here is matched, then these rules are going to get enacted. So to my PCF document for your OU campus PCF files, the root node is going to be document. So whenever you see a template that starts with match/document, that's essentially the container that has everything that will happen for that PCF page. Opening up this template, matching the document, you're going to see here I have my HTML being built out, and you're going to see the different ways that my templates are being pulled in. So after I have my templates defined, I actually need to use them. Xsl call template is going to be the instruction to actually grab the one by this name. So I have a template here on line 86 named header. I'm telling my system inside of this header node in my HTML, actually drop the contents that you find inside that header template. So that is one way in order to call information. The other way to do it is to use an Xsl Apply Templates. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit here. I have a lovely comment here that tells you it's the beginning of the Training Tuesday templates. So these are the ones we're going to really dive into. Everything above here is really just building out the HTML page itself. So opening up line 168, you're going to see in here, I have a new instruction called Xsl Apply Templates. Apply Templates essentially going to iterate through the targeted XML. And then anytime it finds an Xsl template that matches that qualifier, then it's going to enact those rules. So let me show you a good example of that. Back to my first page, my example index page here. In my first editable region here, for my example, I have my accordion. So taking a look at the code for that space, I'm going to open up my line 18 here. I essentially have inside this editable region a table with a class of accordion. So what's happening here is I have a set of Xsl, the template, that is looking for table with this particular class. That's going to be inside my snippets.xsl. And there it is. On line 21, I have my Xsl template, and it's matching any table with the attribute class equal to OU accordion. So anytime that table with that particular class is found anywhere on my page, it will be transformed into the accordion. So that's how that accordion or any of your table transformation snippets are working. It uses an apply templates, and I have just this template here that is looking for that table with that particular class. Back to my first tab here, we're going to continue to scroll down. The next instruction I want to talk to you about is Xsl copy of. So inside this editable region, scrolling down on the source code itself, I have a div here, and I've given it an attribute of data-tt equal to. So I'm just using this particular attribute so I can target it appropriately in my Xsl. It's not a required attribute. Honestly, it has no other name outside of its data for this particular Trading Tuesday. But that's how I'm keeping things matched across my PCF file and the Xsl, so you can easily see how they interact. So as you can see in this source code, I have this div. It has a particular background color as a style on it. I have a bolded sentence and an ordered list with 3 different list items in it. Over to my Xsl, I'm going to open up that template. So I have a template that's matching that div with the data-tt of copy of. And I literally just have instructions in here for copy of, select, the dot just means self, that current node that we're targeting. So I'm telling it to copy this div and just plop it down. So here I am seeing the div in the background with the red background. This text is bolded, and I have my unordered list. So it gives you a good idea of what copy of does. Copy of is going to target that specific element, and it will copy that element with all of its attributes, as well as any child nodes inside of it. So it all gets pulled over in the exact structure that it started. Xsl value of is a little bit different. So let's look at the source code on my PCF page. Scrolling down here, I'm going to open up this div with that label of value of. And it's very similar to what we saw inside the copy of. So I still have this div. It still has the background color of red on it. I still have the sentence. I've moved the strong tag a little bit just to be able to give you a little bit of variety here. But I have some text wrapped in a strong tag. I have an unordered list. I have list items here. So I have all of this internal structure. To my Xsl file, I'll go ahead and open up that template. And again, all I'm doing is using Xsl value of, and I'm selecting the node itself. Now, value of is going to treat it a little bit differently. It's not going to look at this original targeted node. It's going to look inside of it. So it doesn't bring in the opening tags, closing tags, attributes, those things. What it's essentially doing is just returning the text values of this targeted element and then any child text elements inside of it. So if I come to my first tab, you're going to notice here my Xsl value of, all I have is this string of text. And if we do a quick inspect, so we can just see what it looks like in the actual code itself, we'll open up that OUC div. There it is. It is literally just taking the text that is found inside of it and dropping it here. Continuing down our list, we have an Xsl if. So an Xsl if is essentially a singular logic check. It's going to look at the test that you're defining here. If it's true, then this rule will be enacted. If it's not, it just gets skipped. So there is no else if, there is no else, there is no final catch-all. It is a single yes or no, do it or don't. Inside of this editable region, I essentially have 2 unordered lists. I'll explain why I'm separating them into 2 unordered lists in just a little bit. But I have my 2 unordered lists here. Inside each one, I do have an LI. And then inside of each of those, I have an A tag. The first one is a link to an external site, starts with the HTTPS. My second one here is an internal link, so it's using a root relative path here. Over to my Xsl, let's see what magic is going on here. So I'm telling the Xsl to go find a UL that has that data TT of if. I am building out the unordered list here. So the UL, the LI, I'm hard coding here. I'm then telling it to copy the A that is inside of here. And then I'm adding this Xsl if. If this A tag starts with or has a href that begins with HTTPS, then I'm recognizing that it must be in an external link. So I'm telling the system to then add this little note right next to it. So this is an external link. So if we come back to our original tab, that first link was external. So this little bit of text is getting added here. We actually use this type of rule on our support site to add a little icon that shows you that you're about to leave the support site. So it's a nice use for it. You'll notice the second link here is not getting any kind of this is an external link. Number one, because it's not. And number two, because that Xsl if is being returned as false, it just doesn't do anything. It just continues on its way. Now this is nice for a singular logic tech, but sometimes you want a little bit more logic going on. So in that case, you're going to want to use an Xsl choose. So choose is essentially the outer wrapper for all of the logic that's happening in here. There's actually more going on in here. There are more Xsl instructions. So you have an Xsl choose, you have an Xsl when, you have an Xsl otherwise. So let's start by taking a look at the source code here. It's exactly what we were looking at before in our Xsl if. Two unordered lists. My first one is going to have that first LI with an A tag that is an external link. The second one, an internal link with a root relative path. Over to my Xsl, let's see what's happening here. So opening up this template, again, I'm hard coding building out the UL, the LI. I'm telling it to then copy that A tag, drop it in there, and then I'm telling it to choose. Xsl choose is just the outer wrapper. No attributes are added on this one. But inside of here, it is expecting Xsl when. Singular, multiple, you can really have as many Xsl whens in here as you would like. Each Xsl when is a singular logic check. So I'm going to test this particular scenario. In this case, it's very similar to what we were doing before with the F. So if the href on the A starts with, in this case, I didn't make it secure, just HTTP. In that case, put in that little note that tells me it's an external link. I can have as many Xsl whens in here as I want. So if I wanted a separate little note, if it is HTTP or if it's HTTPS, then I can have multiple of them here. An important note about your Xsl whens. The Xsl is going to iterate from the first one and go down the list. So if the first Xsl when matches the current situation, it will be enacted, and then the rest of this Xsl choose is abandoned. So if you're creating multiple Xsl whens, you're going to want the super specific case to be the first one listed and then become more general after that. So if I did want to do two separate Xsl whens, one for HTTP and one for HTTPS, I'd actually want to put the HTTPS as the first Xsl when, and then the HTTP is the second. Because technically, any external link is going to match HTTP. It's just a question of whether or not that S is tagged on in the end. After the system goes through all of these Xsl whens, if none of them match the current case, I then have an instruction for Xsl otherwise. Otherwise has no attributes on it, so there's no logic test here. It literally is just the catch-all. And in this case, I simply use an Xsl otherwise that adds that little note that says that this is an internal link. So back to my original page, we'll take a look here. There's my first link with the little external link note. My second link is the internal link note. Continuing down, the last Xsl instruction or XSLT instruction we're going to be talking about here is for each. Now, this is why I had those previous examples separated out into two different lists, because we didn't yet have a way to iterate through each of the LIs that are going to be inside of it. Now we can, with Xsl for each. Let's take a look at the code. So opening up this particular OUC div, I have a UL, again, with that data TT for me to target. I have 4 different links in here. Each one is its own LI with its own A, and then links 1 through 4. Over to my Xsl, we'll scroll down a little bit. Let me go ahead and open up this template. Again, I'm hard coding in the UL here, and then I'm bringing in my Xsl for each. So talking about context, I'm already looking at the UL when I defined it up here in my match. So I'm going to say inside of that, select each one of these LIs. And for each one, again, I'm hard coding this LI, but I'm adding this class of navigation. So this class is not on my PCF page. It is being built here inside my Xsl. That's what's going to give me some nice styling that I've included as part of my CSS. And then inside the LI, just go ahead and copy whatever the A tag is in there to just drop it in. Close my for each, close my UL. I put in a couple of breaks, so I had a little bit of space there. So coming back to my first tab, this is inside the editable region, just an unordered list, super plain, not exciting at all. But because inside the Xsl, I'm adding in that class and I'm having it iterate through each and every LI, I end up with this really fancy, nice class that I'm pretty proud of. Thank you very much. So that's how you're able to iterate through multiples. That's what you'll often see when you have lists like this, or even sometimes your different table rows or TD nodes in different snippets and things like that. So that essentially is going to walk us through all of the XSLT instructions. So let's go ahead, scroll down a little bit here, and let's talk about our Xpath expressions. Now, some of these we've seen already just because it necessitated using them, but let me define what's going on here. Xpath expressions are ways for you to be able to target specific data, specific nodes, or specific content inside your XML file. As I mentioned before, the Xpath the data navigation itself kind of looks like a root relative path, but then I can tag these things onto it to be even more specific. So the first one I want to talk about here is element, and then in square brackets, some number. So this is going to target that numberth element in the current context. So wherever I am looking, whatever the context that has been built so far, find me the however manyth of that particular element. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Looking at that PCF code here, and then opening up that div, I essentially have a section with my data TT, so that's what I'm going to be targeting. And inside here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 divs, and then each div has a sentence, which is basically noting which div we have. Over to my Xsl, we'll go ahead and open up this template. So I am currently targeting the section. So I'm already inside that section node. And I'm telling it, I'm going to talk about this in a second, but I'm essentially telling it, go find the second div that is inside of here. I have an H4 here. That's allowing me to have a kind of a little header. And then it's giving me, I'm just telling it to give me the value of, so the text value of that second div. So that's what's giving me this here. So here's my hard-coded little heading of this section, and then it's only displaying the div content for number 2. Now, let me explain what all that extra stuff in there is. So here's an interesting thing about the way OU Campus is set up when we're talking about editable regions. There is a final catch already built into your Xsl, which essentially says if there's no template, no Xsl template, that matches what it finds inside the editable region, just copy it over. So that's how you're able to go inside the editable region and create sentences with your own formatting, add classes that are specific to your implementation. All of that is done and possible because the default is just copy it over, just bring it over to the final HTML product. Now, for this particular example, I wanted to be able to show you guys that you can target a specific element. So I wrapped it inside this Xsl choose to say, if it's div number 2, do this. And then notice I have my otherwise here that's self-closing, which is essentially telling the system, if it's any other div, don't do anything. If I didn't have this particular otherwise here, I would still see all 4 divs, because anything that didn't match would just get copied over. So that's why you have some extra stuff going on here. All right, back over to my PCF file, scrolling down. The next way that I can target here using the element is this inside square brackets, an a symbol targeting a specific attribute with a specific value. So this is looking at those opening tags. So I would target the element, and then inside there I can target any attribute that it has, and I can set it equal to a specific value. So taking a look at the code that is inside that div, I essentially have, again, a section with that data TT, so that's what I'm targeting. I have 4 divs in here, 3 of them with no class, and then I have this final one with a class that I've just set equal to example class, just so I have something to target. So over to my XSL, again, we'll go ahead and open up this one. So again, I'm wrapping it in that choose with the XSL when with the self-closing otherwise, so that way all of the other divs that don't qualify here are not copied over. And I'm essentially targeting the div with the attribute of class, which is equal to example class. Notice the single quotes in here and the double quotes on the outside. When you are typing up these specific targets and you have attributes with values like this, you want to be really careful about alternating your double quotes on the outside with single quotes on the inside. Otherwise, sometimes the source code editor tries to help you by closing double quotes, but you didn't want it to close there, you wanted it to close over here. So make sure you're alternating as you're going deeper and deeper in. So again, I have an H4 that's just giving me a basic heading, and then I'm just telling it bring over the value of, so the text value of that particular class. Ooh, too many clicks. So back over to my first page, there's that H4 just hard-coded header, and there's my text. This is a particular div that has some class. My next expression here is node. So node is going to allow me to target the child node structure of the current context. So it's kind of similar to what we were seeing before with like a copy of, whereas it'll look inside and grab all of the node structure. This allows me to target it. So I still have to give it instructions on how it should, or what it should do with it, but allows me to target the node structure and hold on to it. But it's inside of the current context. So it's not copying the outer node, it's copying anything inside of it. So let me show you what I mean. Over to the source code here, we're going to open up this node. You're going to see I actually have 3 divs in here. I have an outer one with a red border, an inner one with a blue border, or a middle one with a blue border, and an inner one with a black border. Over to my XSL. I'm asking it to do a copy of, I'm targeting outer div, and I'm saying from that outer div, just give me that internal child structure. So the outer div, this one, is the one with the red border. Because I'm targeting this, it's only going to grab what's inside of it. So when I come back here to my displayed example, I don't see the red border on the outside. I only see the inner blue and black ones. My next expression here is double slash. I love double slash. Double slash allows you to match a specific target, but at any child level. So you don't need to know the exact path to get to this exact thing right here. This is especially helpful when you have editors who are opening up editable regions, they're making adjustments and changes, you have p tags, inside div tags, and then strung tags, and you have all of these things going on. In a typical written out XPath, you would need to know every single one of those elements so that way you can build out appropriately. The double slash means you don't. It just means from here, anything at a child level that has this particular qualifier that's what you're targeting. So let me show you what I'm talking about. The source code of that particular div. So I have a div on the outside, which is my data TT double slash. And you're going to notice in here, I have a whole bunch of things going. What we're going to be looking at really is the A tags. So I have an A tag here that is the immediate child of the div. Then I have a P tag with an A tag inside of it. I have another div in here with the A tag inside of there. And then I have a strong tag with the A inside of there. So I've buried these A tags all sorts of deep inside this structure. To the XSL, we'll open up this one. So I'm targeting that outer div, and I'm telling the system, give me a copy of, so grab this particular node with the attributes and all the information. If there was anything nested inside of it, those would come too. And I'm just saying, starting from that div, go deep, down deep into anything that's inside of here, find me any of those A's. So back to the code for a quick moment. Each one of these is just a small, quick word in lorem ipsum. If I look at my final preview, they're all getting strung together because I didn't put any spaces or anything nice and neat in here. But each one of these are all getting pulled in and dropped in together. Attribute is a way to match the attributes of the current context. So it essentially allows me to look at the element and then peel those attributes off of it. So let me show you what's happening inside this editable region. In this region, I essentially have my div on the outside, and then I have 3 separate P tags. Each one of those P tags has a different attribute on it. So I have an example here. I have a style, which is giving me a color of red, and then I have a class, which is example class, which is actually giving it slightly larger text and a green coloration instead. Notice each one of these sentences is different. I have an example sentence, not an example sentence. I have a sentence that has an example sentence fragment inside of it. So I have all of these different pieces of content in here, but maybe I don't necessarily care about the text content. I'm interested in what attributes are on it. That's what I could use this for. So over to my XSL, we'll go ahead and open this up. So I'm targeting my div, and then inside of that div, I'm looking for any P tag. So I'm already digging deep into it to find those P tags. I'm hard coding my P tag, and then I'm telling it to give me a copy of the attributes on it. So this is going to be applied to my P tags. This sentence is the actual content that will be pulled over into my HTML. So I'm not actually bringing the original sentences that were written inside this editable region. I'm taking this sentence as the base and just adding the attributes to the P tag. So if we come back to our first tab, you'll see the sentence was written in the XSL, but it has the attributes from each sentence in the editable region. So each one of these is using that same base sentence, but the attributes on it are being pulled from that original content that was inside this editable region. That walks us through all of those pieces there. Let's take a look at Xpath Functions. So functions are ways to take a look at the information that you're targeting and actually get a return from it. So count is essentially going to return the number of elements found. So inside the parentheses, the parameter that I would take here is the element that you want to target. So taking a look at what's inside that editable region, I essentially have a div, unordered list, and then I have 6 items in here. In my XSL, I've created a P tag. So there are blank list items in this region. And then I'm using this XSL copy of, and I'm telling it to count the LIs that it finds in here. So I have 6 items in my list. Over here is telling me there are 6. There's the product of my count list items in this region. Uppercase and lowercase, pretty awesome. So in both of these editable regions, I've created a table. And inside of that table, I've created 2 rows and 2 columns each. And then inside each of these, I have text that is originally set up as camel case. So I'm using the same code for both the uppercase and the lowercase example here. And what I'm doing is having it enact on this TD to create all uppercase or create all lowercase. So my uppercase is going to take any text that's been put in here and completely convert it into all uppercase. So this is really nice if you have a website display section where it should all be uppercase, maybe a heading or a particular snippet or something like that. It's also really good if you're doing some logical matching. So if you have a particular snippet where someone needs to text enter something, and you need all of those to match together. Well, some people are going to do it capital, some people are going to do it lowercase, some people are going to sit accidentally on the shift button, so the first 2 letters are all capital. So using a consistent uppercase, or probably your lowercase would be a better choice for that, allows you to do better logical matching. So taking a look at this uppercase example, let's look at our Xsl. So in this one here, I'm targeting the table itself, and I'm going inside that table to look for that first TD. Once it finds the first TD, I'm telling it do a copy of, take that node itself and make it all uppercase. So that's what's giving me this text is originally uppercase. Same idea for my lowercase. So again, the code itself inside there, same table, I've just changed which TD or which data TT I'm targeting here. And in the Xsl, again, I'm doing the same thing here, targeting the table, looking for the second TD inside of it. I'm doing a copy of for the lowercase. Now, I'd mentioned before, notice there's no editable region button here. It's because the way that these ones are being demonstrated is a little bit different. So let's come back into my Xsl for a second. I'm going to scroll up to my page content template. Now for most of these here, I'm using this Xsl Apply Templates. Using an Xsl Apply Templates, targeting an editable region is going to have that editable region button appear. Now the difference here, as we scroll down, to get to our uppercase. I am using apply templates here, but in this case, my select is not the OUC div itself. It starts with the OUC div, and then I'm telling it go inside of that and find the first TD. So really what it's targeting is the first TD. Because I'm not targeting the OUC div itself, and I'm targeting a different node inside of it, that's why the editable region button is not appearing. So the editable region button will appear if the OUC div opening tag itself is included in what's being pulled in. In this case, I'm only pulling in that TD, so it's not there. That's why we don't have an editable region button. Let's go ahead and shrink down this template. And we'll scroll back down to where we are. Good. So now we have our count, perfect, uppercase, lowercase. Our next one is going to be starts with. So I've already used starts with earlier in examples, but I thought I'd talk about it specifically here. Starts with is going to check the input to see if it starts with a specified string. And if it does, it'll return true. If it does not, it'll return false. So let's take a look at what content is inside this editable region. Again, I have a table going here. I'm going to be targeting the TD on it. That's why, again, I don't have that editable region button. I'm not targeting that whole OUC div. I'm looking for specific TDs inside of it with a specific table here. So I have Training Tuesdays are amazing. I learned so much from Training Tuesdays, and this Training Tuesday was the best one ever. And let's take a look at my rules over here. Opening up my Xsl template, I'm essentially telling it to select and copy the TD that starts with Training Tuesday. So it's going to assess which of these TDs starts with Training Tuesday, and it'll give me a true false. So Looking at the code itself, the first one starts with the training Tuesday, the others do not. That's why I'm getting a true, false, false. Contains is going to check the input again against a specific string and then return true or false. So I'm using the same set of code inside contains. So my same table with the same training Tuesday TDs inside of here. The difference here is inside this template, I'm just asking it to bring over any that contain training Tuesday at all. So all three of these, as we look at the source code, have training Tuesday in them somewhere, which is why my return results here are true, true, true. My last one here is matches. So matches, again, will check the input, but at this point, it's going to match against a regex. So I can be super controlling now. I'm not checking against a specific string. I can create a regular expression in order to build out what I want. And then it'll return my true or false. So again, inside that editable region, exact same table that we had before. But this time in my Xsl, what I'm having it do is take a look at those TDs, find any that start with a capital letter, and then before it comes across a space, have an exclamation point at the end. So what I'm essentially looking for is any of these where the exclamation point is preceded by a word with a capital letter to start. Back to my source code. So amazing is a lowercase letter. That one won't qualify. This one will. That one will not. So back over to my PCF here. My matches are coming back false, true, false. I have a question here saying any tools online that can check the Xsl match or regular expression. The answer is yes. And then the question becomes, which one is it? So somewhere buried inside my bookmarks somewhere is a really nice regular expression checker that our support team actually provided me with. What I can do is I can provide that to you guys, and I'll even include it inside the resources that I'll associate with this Training Tuesday so that you'll have it. Online tools that can check the Xsl match. That one I'd have to look into. At the end of the day, OU Campus will check it for you. But I see what you're saying to see if there's an online tool that might be a little bit more helpful rather than going through all of the OU Campus pieces. So let me check for you on that one to see if our support team has any Xsl matching. Regular expression, I know we definitely have. So I'll provide that to you. All right, continuing down, we have name. Name is going to return the element name in the current context. Now, at this point, we've always been targeting the current context. So what the heck is the point of knowing what the name is? Well, sometimes you don't know exactly what you're targeting. Inside this div, I have my div. I have a couple of p tags. I have an h1 in here, another p tag. And here's what I essentially set up. Sometimes you don't know exactly what you're going after. So in this template, I'm looking at the div with that data TT of name, and then I'm looking for any child inside of it. I'm selecting the node information inside of it. So I don't know exactly which element it's going to find because I'm just having it look for any child. So this is the case where I'm essentially building the Xsl element with that name. Curly brackets here, what the heck is that? Up here, this parent node has an attribute called expand text equals yes. When I have this attribute on the parent node, anytime you see those curly brackets, it's essentially shorthand for Xsl value of. So super helpful in this case because I can't put an Xsl value of inside of the name value attribute inside those quotes. It will kick out an error. But using this shorthand, it'll accept it this way. So what I'm essentially doing is telling it to go find the element with a class of TT example, and then build that element and wrap it around this example sentence here. So in the code itself, that class is on an H1. Notice the H1 inside my editable region is just a little lorem ipsum. But on my live page, I have my H1 and it's using that example sense that I have inside the Xsl. So it's a way to actually pull out what is that name of that element. Generate ID, pretty awesome. Generate ID is going to create, it's kind of a pseudo random value. It's relatively sequential. But these are super helpful if I'm building out things like accordions where I need each row to have its own ID. So in this example here, I simply have an unordered list. And then for each one of these, I want to put a random ID on it. Pseudo random ID on it. So let's open up that template. So I'm hard coding the UL for each LI it finds in here, hard coding the LI, and I'm adding an attribute onto this LI. The attribute's name is going to be ID, and I'm going to tell it to select for the value, just do that function generate ID. So if I come back over here and we inspect these LIs here, each one of them is going to have an ID on it. So as you can see, not really random, it's relatively sequential, it's skipping every other, but it's giving a unique ID for each one of them in this list. Position is going to return the position number of a targeted element. Now the nice thing about this is your target elements don't need to be sequential. So the way that these LIs were all sequential here doesn't have to be that way when you're using the position. So I find this to be really helpful if you're going to be having your editors supplying multiple images, maybe for different responsive designs. So inside this editable region, I actually have 3 elements here. Placekitten.com, excellent place to get placeholders. And then the slashes at the end here, these are essentially the width and height. So I have a 1000 by 1000, 500 by 500, 100 by 100. So that would be like my desktop, medium screen, and my mobile image. So what I can do inside the Xsl is tell it to give me a copy of the image that is in position number 2. So these would not have to be sequential. So if I had divs, paragraphs, whatever in between these, I could still use this position in order to target it. So it's only going to be displaying, in this case, just that middle-sized option. My last function here, very similar or related to what we were just talking about. It's essentially going to return the position number that is the last one in this particular context of the particular element I'm looking for. So again, inside of this last editable region, I have my 3 images wrapped inside a div. And I'm just telling it in the Xsl, go give me a copy of, so drop in here the image, that's the last one inside of this div. So it'll drop that one there. Concat is going to allow me to take pieces of strings and basically pull them together. So it joins them together, returns that resulting string for me. So inside this editable region, I essentially have a table that is giving me listings of first name, middle name, last name, and the salutation for the person. So I've gone ahead and dropped all of my information in here. And then in the Xsl, I'm setting up variables. So I'm setting up a variable of last and targeting that particular table in that T-body, in that TR, the TD that is the 3rd one. That's going to be the last name. The salutation, same thing, but it's in the TD that is the 4th one. I'm doing it this way so that way I can call the variables in concat, because concat has to take strings. So Xpath isn't going to work there. So inside the hard-coded HTML, I have paragraph tag, I have an EM, and I'm saying dear, and I want to say whatever the salutation is, add a space, whatever the last name is. So I can concat forever here, comma separated values for each one of those strings. Put in a break, and then we'd like to invite you to ... So that's what I have going on here. So it's concating my salutation, space, my last name here. Normalized space. Now, this one was a little bit tricky to be able to display here just because everything inside OU Campus is trying to clean things up for you, which means I needed to force it to break. Normalized space here strips out leading and trailing white space, as well as replaces white space in the center and cuts it down to just a singular space. So in order to display this, I essentially created multi-edit fields for each one of these. So each one of these three is a multi-edit field. Let's open up that multi-edit, we'll take a look. I've wrapped each of these inside a pre because I wanted it to maintain the spaces on it. So I have this pre-formatted tag wrapping it. Now you're gonna ask, why didn't you just drop it into an editable region? Well, here's the cool, fun thing that makes life a little bit more difficult for me to display this to you. Inside the editable region, if I hit spaces inside that editor and I save, the editor actually converts them to non-break spaces. So it's more palatable from an HTML perspective. Normalized space cannot target non-break spaces. It only targets white space. So normalized space by itself works really well if you're pulling in data from like an XML file that has leading space, trailing space, interior space between words. We have a solution for the non-break space. Don't worry, that's coming. But normalized space targets white space. So each of these are things that I'm going to want to clean up. So in my XSL, I have 3 templates in here because each one of those multi-edit fields is actually its own OU div. That's the way you build out multi-edit fields. Each one gets wrapped in its own div. But these are all essentially the same thing inside here. I'm targeting the div itself and then looking inside the pre, and then I'm telling it to give me a copy of a normalized space for this particular element. So if there's no parameters in here, it's just going to target the current context. So all 3 of these are doing the exact same thing. Copy of, select normalized space. So that's what's giving me, let's go back to edit here, that nice cleaned up view. Scrolling. My goodness, there's a lot of stuff on here. That's what's giving me this nice cleaned up view here. It is taking out the leading white space, the trailing white space, and the interior. Replace is going to be the last one of these Xpath functions that we're going to be talking about. Replace is going to target a string and it performs a regex replacement on it. So it does not have to be string to string. I can actually have a regex for it. So in the code of this particular OUC div, we'll open up that replace. I have just plain lorem ipsum. So any one of these sentences in here starts with a capital letter. And then again, it's all just lorem ipsum here. To my XSL, we'll go ahead and open up that replace. So I'm targeting the outside div. I'm hard coding the P. I'm setting a variable naming replace to select the P itself because replace is going to start the first argument is the string that you're going to do the replacement on. So again, Xpath isn't going to work in here. I need to create the variable to be able to call it here. So I'm telling it, go inside that P and then replace the content of that P. And this is what I want it to look for. Look for any word that starts with a capital letter. And then continue looking at it until you hit a space and replace it with the word Barbara. So the beginning of every one of my sentences should have the word Barbara instead. So if we come back to our preview here, yep, every one of my sentences starts with my name. So nice, easy way to be able to get a little bit of additional fame and fortune right there by adding your name to the front of every sentence. All right, so that wraps up any of our Xpath functions. The last thing I wanted to talk about here is OU Campus unique functions. So these are things that we have to credit our pro services team. Our pro services team does the implementations for our customers. And as they go through it, they are in the weeds with the XSL just like you guys are. So as they're going through it, they've started to realize, wow, this takes a little while to code, or that required a lot of steps or something like that. So we've created these OU Campus unique functions that make that coding easier. Now, these are have been developed over the course of time. So depending upon how old your implementation is, you may not have the original function in your XSL, but don't worry. Inside this XSL file that I'm going to be providing to you as part of the resources, all the way down at the bottom, yep, right there, I've included, starting on line 431, the OU Campus unique functions. So if you don't have them in your implementation already, I have included them here in the XSL. It functions fine right from here. So like my sandbox didn't include any of these. I copied, pasted them here, works fine from here. But if you wanted to pull them out and put them into like your functions.xsl or your ou-functions.xsl, you could do that too. So let's talk about what each one of these does. All right, OU textual content. So remember we were talking about normalized space before and saying that it cleans up white space, but it does not target non-break spaces. Well, it's kind of awkward because your editors are going to be editing inside the editable region. If they hit space there, the editor is going to convert them into non-break spaces. OU textual content converts the non-break spaces into white space and then normalizes it to clean it all up. So if we come into that editable region there, we'll go ahead and open it up. I have my too many spaces in here. It is the editable region itself. So all of this space here is being converted into non-break space. And then here inside my template, I'm essentially targeting that div and telling it, apply this function to any p tags you find in here. So converting all of those non-break spaces into white space and then taking the white space and sending it through that normalized space function to clean them all up. OU PCF param. So this allows you to return the value of a PCF parameter without having to create and write out the full XPath structure. So let's look at the source code of this PCF file. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling all the way up to the top. If I were to target a parameter in here, I would essentially have to, starting at the document, target the OUC properties and then target the parameter inside of it with that specific name. So it's not hard, it's just extra keystrokes. So instead of doing that, you can use this OU PCF param. So I'm just going to tell it to do a copy of the OU PCF param, and then in the parentheses, you're going to add the parameter in quotes that is the name, the unique name of that parameter, and then it'll be able to grab it and pull it in. So the only parameter that I have on here that I have set up has the unique name of heading, and it is just the title of this particular Training Tuesday, the Common XSL Elements in OU Campus. So over here, it's able to just pull in and drop that right there. The last OU Campus unique function is OU multi-edit field. Same generalized idea here. If we come into the source code of this page and we scroll down, we got to find that normalized space. Okay, I left and closed. Oh my goodness, we talked about a lot of stuff. So if I wanted to target and pull the value of multi-edit content, starting at the document root inside an OUC div, I have an OUC multi-edit, and then inside there, I finally get to my content. So again, not hard, extra keystrokes. So what I can do is I can use this OU multi-edit field and target the label that we're putting on the div outside of it. So over to my XSL, we'll open up that one. So again, I'm creating that p tag. I'm going to do a copy of the multi-edit field, and that div had a label of normalized space. So from here, if I come over, I'll be able to say, hey, there's all that leading space that we had before. It's pulling in the value of that particular multi-edit field. Question, OU PCF param need to define functions at Xsl, or is it predefined? So whether or not OU PCF param or any of these three is defined is based upon when you were implemented last. So a brand new customer is implemented today will have all 3 of these because we add these over time as our pro services team finds them, develops them to make life easier. So if you have an older implementation, it may not be defined yet, but that's okay. In this XSL file that I'm going to provide to you, I've copied in the unique functions. So if you try to use it and you're getting an error that's telling you that that function isn't defined, you can essentially copy the entire function. PCF param happens to be a little bit bulkier, and add it into your functions.xsl. So it's already here built out for you. You just need to grab it from the resources that I'll provide to you. All right. Whew, that was a lot of stuff just within the wire. All right. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to ask any additional questions that you may have. As you're typing, allow me to mention. Down to here, and then to this. Okay, that. Our next Training Tuesday is going to be held on May 26th. They're going to be covering the topic of OU Campus V11. We're going to be overviewing features, display, all of that stuff as part of our V11 introduction. So by all means, keep an eye out for that. Actually, as of a minute ago, the registration link is now available on our support site. So if you're interested in getting a preview of what that's going to look like, by all means, sign up for our next Training Tuesday. I'll give you guys an extra couple of minutes if you have any additional questions, but if not, I want to wish you a wonderful rest of your week. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.